Well, good morning, church family. So before I get into the message today, I want to talk about schedule the next few weeks so that you know what's coming. A little bit of a different time on several services in the next few weeks. So we'll start with this coming Wednesday. We have WOW at 7 o'clock, and it's a family WOW. And so bring your kids. We'll have a time of singing here at 7 this Wednesday. 1 week from today, we have one combined worship service at 9:30. So please make note of that. No Bible classes a week from today, and also no evening service a week from today. 2 weeks from today, which would be December 29th, we will also have one combined service, again at 9:30. No Bible class that day. That evening, so December 29th evening, 5 o'clock, there's an area-wide worship service at North MacArthur. So both the next two Sundays, schedule's a little bit different. It'll be pretty full, but it's also a really encouraging Sunday because singing sounds great, and it's just a great, I always enjoy December when we do this. Also, there is Christmas Eve service. Like once a year, someone will ask the church office the date of Christmas Eve service. It is December 24th, every year. It's at 5 o'clock in this room. Christmas Day, obviously, we'll not have Wednesday classes. And then January 1st also falls on a Wednesday, and we will not have Wednesday programming on January 1st either. And then everything will get back to normal on January 5th. So a few months ago, I had one of those heart-pounding decision moments. Like literally, my heart was just racing in my chest. My family and I were in Texas, and there's a ropes course south of Dallas, a very unique ropes course that we were enjoying. And it's a very tall wooded area. And this ropes course was unique in that I've never been to one like this where we got all harnessed up, and then there were green runs and blue runs and black runs. So very similar to skiing. The green ones are the easiest. Then you move up from there, and the black ones are the hardest. So we spent about 2.5 hours just having fun and do all sorts of things. You know, you walk across wires, you walk across logs, you climb up rope ladders. And the end of every run was a zip line. So you just zip all the way down to the ground, land on your feet, and you move on. Well, before we left, I decided I've got to do that black before we leave. And so the black is the highest one. It's actually above the tree line, so it's 4 stories up. So I climb all the way up there, and I start doing the obstacles, and they're super hard. Most of the obstacles I couldn't even complete. But I get to the end, and I'm about to zip line down, and it's a small platform. There's no zip line. And so I'm just like looking over the edge, like I don't know where do I go? And then I hear a voice. It's from a guy down below. He's actually one of the workers, about 18 years old, long blonde hair, totally a surfer dude kind of a guy. And he says, "Hey, you need to clip in to this other clip and you jump." And I looked down at him like, "What did you say?" It's like, "Yeah, it's a bungee jump." I was like, "What? I thought it was a zip line." No, it wasn't. I had no idea that this one actually ended in a bungee jump. So it's one thing if you're like signing up for a bungee jump and you know what's coming. I had no idea. So there I am standing on this platform, and I just yelled down to the guy. I said, "I don't want to jump." And then he said that I could turn around, and there was a ladder to climb down for people that were too afraid. Man, that didn't sit well either. So I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't want to jump, but I don't want to be a scaredy cat either. So I just stood there for quite a while. And again, none of my friends are there. Nobody is watching this. My family has actually started walking to the car. They're not even watching me. It's just me and the surfer dude and my own fear. And I'm just, I don't know, just trying to figure out what to do. And so the question that was rolling through my head in this moment, in the heart-pounding moment, was this: do I have to do this? Like, do I have to jump? Now, I'll finish the story in just a minute, but I, for a moment, want you to think about the last time you felt that tension. Do I have to do this? So maybe Teenager in the audience, you asked a girl out on a date, and right before you asked, you're like, do I have to do this? Like, I don't want to do this. What if I say it wrong? What if she says no? What if I fall over and die? Like, what do I have to say this? Maybe you're a athlete or a musician and you practiced and you were definitely ready for whatever your thing was, but then the moment came and you stepped onto the stage, you stepped up to the court. Do I have to do this? Mothers who have given birth to children, you probably asked this when you went into labor. And the answer was obviously yes. Yeah, at that point, yeah, you have to do that. Dads walking down your daughter the day she gets married, maybe that question rolled through your head. Do I have to do this? Do I have to give her away? So here's what I did. I'm standing on the platform, don't know what to do. So I decide that I will regret it for the rest of my life if I don't jump. So I close my eyes. I actually involuntarily let out a scream like a little child. I think my girls are rubbing off on me. And then I don't jump off the ledge. I just awkwardly kind of just fall just off the ledge. And it only takes about 4 seconds. I'm 4 stories high. And I don't land on my feet. I just kind of stumble. I hit my feet and then I stumble onto the ground. But then I rose to my feet and I was just grateful for the miracle of life. I was so happy. I wanted to hug Surfer Dude, but I didn't know if Surfer Dude wanted me to hug him, so I didn't hug him. And then I carried on my way. I was very, very happy to be alive. So, question is, when it comes to sharing your faith, my guess is you've had that same question in your head. Do I have to do this? I know I probably should. It could be that you have a relationship with someone at your work or your school, you have a friend, and then you have this moment where you're like, I'm pretty sure I could invite this person to church. And you're about to say it, and then you're like, God, I just don't know. Maybe it's offensive. This might push this person away. Or maybe you think, I think there's a lot of other people that are more gifted at this than I am. It's just not my thing, not my personality. Just a few days ago, I hope you know, as a side note, as I read and study, I'm also convicted by the Word, and so I've been really trying in my own life to just look for these opportunities more and more and more. So just a few days ago, I've had this friend I've made from the community, and I got the sense that he didn't go to church, and so I was just like, I was about to invite him. I was going to invite him to Christmas Eve service in Lee Strobel later in the year. And so it was on the tip of my tongue, like, hey, we have this thing going on at church, you should come. And here's what almost made me didn't say it. I thought, well, what if this messes up our friendship? What if he thinks it's weird now because I've invited him to church? Now, in the same way that I jumped off the ledge with the bungee jump I didn't plan on doing, I also, with this guy, I said, hey, would you want to come to the service? And it was fine, and we're still friends. But all I'm saying is that I feel this hesitancy too, like, do we have to say it when that moment comes where you know the opportunity's there, you just don't know if you can take it or not. So here's what I want to do this morning. I want to talk about, is it possible to get through the nerves to do that? Is it possible to get through the stage fright of the invite? And so I want to go to a passage that we started talking about last week, but we didn't really get into the passage. Last week, if you were here, the whole message led up to a reading of the Great Commission. And the whole message last week was really about how we got to the Great Commission and what happened in Matthew's gospel to bring us to this breathtaking ending in which Matthew wanted the church to read that and think this is our job. But today what I want to do is I want to look deeper into the Great Commission itself. In particular, there's 2 words in that paragraph that I think are super helpful on the practical question. Like, okay, but how do we do this, Phil? Like, how do you actually go out there and do this? There's 2 words that I think are super helpful in helping us answer that question. But before I read those 2 words, I want us to read the Great Commission together, just to get it in our heads. So Matthew 28, and put this on the screen here. Everybody, let's do this together. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Here's the first word that I think is pretty important. It's the word go. Now, in most translations that you read, that's how the word is going to read, go. But if you go to the Greek, that verb is not an active verb in the Greek. It's a passive verb. Now, the other three verbs in the Great Commission, make disciples, baptize, and teach, they're all written in the active sense. But go is in the passive sense. And so what this means is that the word really has the connotation not necessarily of go, but as you go. Like this is already happening. And I think that this is a really, really important concept to get in our heads, because what this means is that you don't have to get on a plane to carry out the Great Commission. And you don't have to go on a mission trip to carry out the Great Commission. The Great Commission can be fulfilled as you go in your normal, everyday, day-to-day life. In fact, as an exercise, I wrote down all the places I went to in the last 7 days, because this for me is my as I go. Like, here's what's going on in my life. And for some of you, after I read this list, you're going to feel a lot better about your life, because my list is not that exciting. So here's where I've gone in the last 7 days. All American Pizza, Mitch Park, my chiropractor, Louie's, Mercy, Alfredo's, The Parlor, which is a restaurant in Oklahoma City. A lot of mine are restaurants. And the church building. And that's it. And so on one level, it kind of seems bland, like that's where I go. That's my life. There doesn't seem to be anything that thrilling or exciting about those places. But the truth is, you have to find God somewhere if you're going to find God anywhere. Like, if God's going to show up in your life, it's going to be where you already are. Like the normal places that you go, Walmart, Target, your friend's house, your school, those are not like alternate places that God might show up if the primary places don't work out. No, those normal places for you, those are actually primary venues for God to show up. And so the problem becomes not that God's not doing things and that God's not showing up and that God's not opening doors. The problem becomes that we're not watching. We're not aware. We're not looking for the open doors, as we talked about just a few weeks ago. Here's another way of saying the same thing. There is a sacredness to the particularity of our world. So you have a particular world. You would have a list of 7 to 10 places that's slightly different than my list of 7 to 10 places. That's unique to you. And it's very easy to believe that, well, my world's not that exciting, it's not that important. I just kind of talk to the same people and do the same things over and over and over. But that's not true. The God who authored the universe is still present in your normalcy. So there's a sacredness to the particularity of your world. So one great example of this, Old Testament, love this story from Jacob. Jacob's just walking around by himself, lays on the ground, takes a big long nap, pillow is a rock, has a dream, dreams about God, wakes up in the morning, and he says something super interesting. He says this: "Surely the Lord was in this place," as in this random patch of earth, "but I was not aware of it." So when he woke up that morning, it dawned on him that, whoa, God was here. But when I went to bed last night, I did not know that God was actually here in this place. And I think this is what happens to us all the time. We go throughout our day and we do our routine, and we don't necessarily think that God is that active in our world, but He is. And what it takes is awareness. Opportunity always begins with awareness. You just have to open your eyes to what's already going on in the world, because I believe that God will show up as you go. Again, you don't have to get on a plane to carry out the Great Commission. It happens where you are. Now, here's a second word from the Great Commission that I think is really important. Make disciples. Now, in the Greek, it's just one word. In English, it's 2 words. But what I want to point out is that this word, especially the word make, it's not passive. Like if you do nothing, making will not happen. Like I don't know how to do hardly anything in the kitchen, but the one thing I can make is guacamole. Like I learned that one thing, and I can do that. I can get an avocado, I can mash it up, I can put some salsa in, I can put some spices in. Sometimes I put way too much spices, but I know how to make guacamole. Well, the way that I make guacamole is not by setting an avocado on the counter and looking at it, because nothing happens. Like in order for something to actually happen in the world, you have to make it happen. And so the Great Commission is really helpful here because on the one hand, we carry out the Great Commission just as we go. We just live our normal life. But there do come moments where you got to make something happen. There come moments kind of like me standing on the ledge, like, do I take the ladder down or do I jump off? Like you will have those critical moments where you can choose to do nothing or you can choose to make something. See, making simply means that you cause something to happen in your world. So a child makes a sandcastle. A civil engineer makes a highway. A friend makes a promise. So making, all it is it means that you proactively do something in your normal routine that's a little bit different. So in order to follow the Great Commission, number one, you just got to live your life as you go. But number two, you got to make. At some point, you got to do something different. And I think one of the things that slows me down sometimes, and I know the thing that slows down some of you sometimes, is that we think that we have to make a disciple on day one. We're like, well, I know Jesus told me to make disciples. That's a lot of work. So I don't really want to do anything because I just can't do that all in one day. I don't think that's the truth at all. I think our job is just to do little things to help people become more aware of what God is already doing in their life. So several years ago, Mark Taylor preached a sermon, and I love this sermon because he had 4 super simple things that everybody can do. And so I want to remind you of what these things are because I think they all help us learn to make, to do something different in your routine. Here they are. Number 1, reach across the pew. You could do that. Can you say hi to someone after service today? Walk across the room. Again, you can do that. I can do that. We can actually walk across the classroom, walk across your room at your workplace, walk across the room at the store. You can walk across the room. You can talk across your fence. You can pray across the town. I love these. It's a simple list. And these are things that we can actually do. They offer something new to a routine. Or here's another way that I would say this is not on the screen, but I think you got to make friends before you make disciples. And so sometimes we get scared about the making disciples part. Oh, I don't know how to do that. How do I get people to follow Jesus? Well, maybe you just make a friend first. And if you make a friend and then that friend is around you long enough, then you're going to rub off on that person. Maybe that's where you start. I've been reading this research from Barna all year long, and this series I've given you several great stats from that big study, but here's a good line from the same study. Barna says this: it appears non-Christians look most favorably upon approaches that spark sincere, friendly engagement. So an unbeliever is open to approaches that are they're just friendly. You just make friends. So I want you to think back to this decision where you're kind of at your moment and you've got this person that in your life, it's a neighbor, it's a coworker, it's a friend, maybe it's someone that used to go to church, and you're thinking, okay, I think God's pushing me to reach out to this person, and you get to your moment where you're like, all right, I'm going to ask or not ask, I'm going to text or not text, send this, you get to this critical moment. But here's what I want you to think about. Normally, when we think about this tension, we're thinking about it from the perspective of the saved person, of the Christian who's feeling a little bit fearful. But for just a minute, I want you to think about what does this tension look like from the perspective of the person that doesn't really know Jesus? How does the story function from their world? So I want to tell you about my mom just a little bit. The reason she is a Christian is because a 14-year-old friend named Stan in some random neighborhood in Missouri one evening many, many years ago, looked at her, who was also about 14 years old at the time, and simply said, "Hey, Gail, are you a Christian?" Now, a lot of people today would say, "Whoa, man, if you start with that kind of a question, you're going to push people away." Well, that question, "Are you a Christian?" that prompted my mom to start studying the Bible very intensely, which prompted my mom to go to church, meet a family which took her in, prompted my mom to give her life to Christ, get baptized, become a disciple, and then give her life to raising my brother and I to be disciples as well. Well, that all started with this one question. In fact, just a few weeks ago, so after I preached a lesson about the word lost, because Jesus uses that word a lot, I preached that sermon, and my mom texted me, and the text message said this. She says, "I was one of those lost people, but somebody loved me with the love of Jesus." And then I love her. She ended the text message with this question: what if they hadn't done that? And so what I'm getting at here is that from the perspective of the saved person, the Christian, it's a question of courage. Like, oh, do I have the courage to do this? But from the perspective of the person that's lost, this is a question of salvation. They don't know Jesus. And so I actually find it liberating to think about outreach from the perspective of the person that doesn't know Jesus. Because when you do, then at least the question in my mind is, don't think about why you hesitate. Instead, think about what are all the possibilities that could happen if I take this risk. I mean, sure, it could be that you actually study with this person, and you lead this person to Jesus, and they get baptized. That could happen. But it could also be that maybe you just bring this person to a church service, and the church service becomes the turning point in their life. Or maybe you just connect this person with another person, and that person changes their life. I mean, think again back to Stan, this 14-year-old. Did Stan have any idea that this one question, "Are you a Christian?" would lead Gail down this remarkable journey to find God, and then that she would raise my brother and I to be disciples? He had no idea. In many ways, the trajectory of my entire life goes back to this guy having the courage to ask this question to my mother. And so again, I'm saying, don't think about, wow, what's making me hesitate. Think about the possibilities about what God could do if you took the risk. And here's why this is so important. And I want you, if you're kind of zoned out, zoom in on this point, because I think this is so important. What they have to gain, as far as the outsider, is far more valuable than what you have to lose as a Christian. So what they have to gain, they have so much to gain. Now, what do you have to lose? Okay, maybe you can lose a few reputation points if they don't really like the way that you're telling them about Jesus. Or maybe the thing that you have to lose is you're not as in control over your own image. But what does that person have to gain? Jesus Christ, salvation. And what they have to gain is so much more valuable. It's so much more important than the potential of what you might have to lose. We've talked about this all fall, but there are so many people, even around this building, that don't know Jesus. And if we become really bold in sharing our faith, is that a guarantee that all these people are going to come to know Jesus? No, it's not a guarantee. I mean, God's still the one that changes hearts. But hear me on this. If we don't share, if we choose the route of cowardice, I actually think that does guarantee the results. Because if we're not shining our light, the neighborhood will be dark. That's just what happens. And so if we choose not to take these risks, if we choose to hesitate, if we choose to say, well, somebody else is going to do this, it's not really my thing, then yes, people are not going to come to know God and come to know His Son Jesus. But if we can together become more bold and more courageous, we at least create the possibility that God can now work through these people's lives. And really, if you think about it, this is the story of the incarnation. Many of us, as Todd said earlier, we do think this time of year about the birth of Jesus, about God coming into the world. Well, what's going on at that point? What's going on at that point is that God's looking down at this world, and the world's pretty messed up, full of disease and darkness and death and pain. And what does He do? He sends Jesus to do something, to at least Like at least create the possibility that goodness and light and hope can come into this world. So God doesn't shy away. There's a preacher, Rufus Smith, he puts this whole point so succinctly. I love this point. He simply says this: there is no impact without contact. No impact without contact. And he's right. Like, how in the world can you expect to make an impact on your friend or your neighbor if you're not making contact? How can you expect to make an impact on that person that sits next to you in third hour math if you're not making contact with that person? Like, a lot of us, just kind of back to my avocado story, we just think we're just going to look at it and something's going to happen. But this is why the Great Commission is so important, because Jesus says, no, as you go and you live your life and you're going to Walmart and you're going to Target and you're going to all your normal places, as you go, make disciples. You got to do something. There comes a point where God's going to open a door. You got to recognize it. And then you have to have the courage to walk through. There's no impact. There's no impact without contact. So one of my longtime friends, and many of you know this person, Rhonda Martin, she is so good at practicing the Great Commission. She's so good at making friends with people in the community, and then she's also good about looking for those moments to take that next step in bringing these friends closer to Jesus. And so recently I asked Rhonda, I said, hey, I'd love to hear more about your perspective, but can you invite one of your friends that you've led to the Lord just by making a relationship in the community? Can I interview both of you so that the church can hear about this amazing story and this perspective of just reaching out to people right where you are? And so Rhonda said, absolutely, I've got a friend named Kathleen. We'll meet you and we'll talk about it. So just a few days ago, I got to sit down and interview these two wonderful women, and I want you to hear this brief video about their story.
I met Kathleen at the gas station by my school.
Saw her every day for probably 3 years.
Kathleen's very warm and welcoming in her store. She knows everybody by name just about, because she has a lot of regulars in there.
Rhonda was warm and friendly, always happy. I always knew Rhonda cared about me because she asked about my kids and my day.
Kathleen and I were developing a very close relationship, and I knew she was going through a lot of struggles in her life, and I also knew Jesus was the answer to those struggles.
Well, I've always believed he's looked out for me.
I told her I love studying the Bible with people. Would she be interested in studying with me? I had asked her to study the Bible the first time, and situations in her life didn't enable her to do that.
Hard, difficult times going on in my life that didn't allow me, even though I wanted to.
I didn't give up. I asked her again, probably a few months later, and she said, yes, we're going to make this work.
We studied out of a pamphlet, and it was very interesting, and I was very intrigued. I'd been exposed and knew a lot of things, but it's different hearing it from someone else. I wanted to get baptized. I'd wanted to for a long time. I did it on New Year's Eve.
You know, something I try to do is I go to the same, like when I met Kathleen, I went to the same gas station to get my coffee, develop that relationship, got to know her. I do the same thing when I go to a restaurant. I try to meet the same servers, get to know them, develop relationships with them. And you can take a conversation of have a good day and change it to a spiritual conversation by just saying, have a blessed day. You've already put it on a spiritual level, and that opens the doors further.
I feel like God put Rhonda in my life. I feel like she's a very dear friend, that she actually truly cares.
Both of our lives have been changed because of our relationship, and we both have grown closer to Christ together throughout all this time.
I love what Kathleen, her last comment there, she says, I know Rhonda cares. Like, I know she loves me. And that's why I love that story so much, is because Kathleen doesn't look at Rhonda and think that she's judgmental or she's aggressive or she's domineering. She just thinks Rhonda cares about me. And guys, that's where it starts. You go out and you just truly care about someone. And I've asked Rhonda this, and she would say this about anybody. Even if Kathleen doesn't come to Christ, Rhonda's going to still love Kathleen. And even if the people that you love and care about don't come to church and don't come to believe in Jesus, you still love these people. And so if you watch that video, you know, some of you think, yeah, I can do this, but I know there's still some of you that are like, yeah, I just can't do it. It's not my thing. So let me give you one final example from my life on a much smaller scale. because everybody can do what I'm about to tell you. So for the last 2 years, I go to a restaurant pretty regularly, and I've just tried to be just nice and kind to this same person that serves me. She's a college student from a different country, and I've just got to know her a little bit. And so we're talking 60 seconds of being pleasant most weeks for about 2 years. I have thought this is going nowhere. I thought, man, I'm going to have to do something. I don't really know what the next step is. Well, just a few weeks ago, I walk into the restaurant. She comes running out from behind the counter. She's never done this. It's always been a kind of a professional distance. She comes running out from behind the counter, and she's like, I'm so glad you're here. I have something for you. I'm like, this is it. I'm like, the Lord has blessed me. Like, she's going to want to get baptized today. Like, it's going to be a good thing. And she pulls out of her pocket a 50-cent coupon off my meal. And she hands it to me, and she says, I knew you would enjoy this. And I said, oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for the 2 quarters. I really appreciate that. Now, on one level, it's like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. But on another level, that is a big deal. Because now she knows I care. She knows just by being consistent and being a compassionate person, she knows that I really care about her. And I've actually have one other thing I've tried in the last few weeks, but hopefully that'll be a story for a different day. I'm still looking for that next doorway, and I do think God is opening that door. And I tell you that story just to say you can do this. And so here's your challenge. So we've got 2 big things coming up soon. The first one, we've talked about this, in 9 days we've got Christmas Eve service, and then in less than 2 months we have our big community event where Lee Strobel's coming in February. And our big challenge is we want you to invite, and not just one person. We want you to invite as many people as you feel comfortable inviting. So out in the foyer, we've got invitation cards for both of these events. And this next and final thing I'm going to show you, this is not the biggest deal in the world, but I do think it's really important. So I want you to look at these 2 documents here. These are signatures from elders and staff. We have a big church with a lot of elders and a lot of staff. And we as leaders understand that we set the ceiling for our spiritual fervor in this place. And so if we're not invested, we know that you, as members, you're not going to be invested as well. And so we have decided that we're all in. And so we've put our name on the line. We will be inviting people to these services because we care. And because we believe that this is one of the ways that we're going to make an impact in the city. And so the challenge for you is, I want you to think about who you're going to invite. Christmas Eve service, 9 days, and then the Strobel event is in 2 months. So be thinking about who you can invite. I want to circle back to the first question I asked. Do I have to do this? Here's my short answer to that. If you claim to follow Jesus, I think you will do this, because Jesus never imagined disciples that don't make disciples. And so if you claim to follow Jesus, this really is something you're going to have to pray through and wrestle with, because this is what he called us all to do. If you'll bow with me in prayer. Father, we believe you're sovereign in this city. We believe you're sovereign over the Walmarts and the Targets and the Sonics and the Subways and the Starbucks and every person that shops there and works there. Father, we believe that you're sovereign over the heart of every neighbor we have, every coworker we have. All of our hearts beat because of you. And so, Father, I pray that you would awaken our eyes to the sacredness of our world. Help us not to see it as a normal routine. Help us to see it as an adventure, as a journey in which you can surprise us every single day. Father, when you do give us those moments, I do pray that you'll make us brave. And Father, help us to recognize that what we stand to lose in these encounters with other people is nothing compared to what those people have to gain. And so, Father, may the light from this church family be so bright so that the people around this community see you and see your son Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. So we're about to sing a song about this message, taking the gospel to the world. And if you need anything from this church, you come tell me about that. If you want us to pray for you, we're happy to do that this morning. And if you'd like to give your life to Christ in baptism, we will do that for you as well. Let's stand and let's sing.